Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Triple Threat. I am so overwhelmed with emotion today. It is our season finale. As you know, the basketball season has come to an end. Yes, there is Summer League, but it is not quite in the nut of things like it normally is. And that means for us, we are going to go on season finale or season hiatus, I should say. And I'm overwhelmed with emotion because this is our first season finale ever. And I just want to thank each and every one of you who have been watching the show since our very first episode. I can't believe our first episode was what, January, February, and here we are, July. All these episodes in, all these amazing conversations, all these amazing debates. And we're going on our very first hiatus, and it could not have been possible without each and every one of you. Whether you are watching live on CBS Sports Network every Wednesday, or you're catching up with the episode later on our CBS Sports YouTube page, engaging with all of our social media content, wherever it is that you are consuming Triple Threat, I thank you. I know each and every guest who has been on this show thanks you. And I want to thank each and every guest who has been on this show as well. And of course, the amazing crew behind the scenes. You guys don't get to see them on camera, but they make this show go as smoothly as it does. And when we set out to do Triple Threat, we really wanted to deliver a show that was having the conversations that fans were already having, whether it was on social media, whether it was in their group chats. And it wasn't redundant. It wasn't the same debates. It wasn't even debates that people really weren't caring about. We wanted to deliver a show for the fans. And that's because fans make sports what they are. And without fans, there are no sports, and without sports, there are no fans, and there's no reason why the two worlds can't intertwine to deliver what is the perfect basketball show, if that exists. So when we come back next season, we're going to have a brand new look, a sixth studio that everyone behind the scenes at CBS Sports has been working really, really hard to create. I cannot wait for everyone to see it. I know these last few weeks we've been all over the place. We've been in different locations. I promise you it is going to be worth it. And we're going to go out with a bang today. We're going to go out with the big three like we normally do. Chris Walker, Brad Botkin are going to be joining me, and we have a jam-packed show. So once again, thank you and enjoy the season finale. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Triple Threat. And it could not be a season finale of the show without the big three, Chris Walker, Brad Botkin, who was icing his knees apparently because he was giving out buckets
Give him that work.
YMCA.
Give him that work.
It was worth it. It was worth it.
Well, somebody who is constantly icing his knees apparently because he still is feeling the bumps and the bruises of old age, if you will, in basketball years is Kevin Durant. And he was on a podcast, Mind of the Game podcast with Steve Nash and LeBron James. And we actually got a conversation. This was part two of a longer conversation, but we got a conversation between Kevin Durant and Steve Nash regarding their tenure in Brooklyn. And it was kind of interesting. Listen to this.
When you think back to our time in Brooklyn, what do you think of?
I had just signed that deal. You had just signed the deal. But I feel like we were secure, but everything else around us was going to not in a bad way. We got GMs going to other teams. We got coaches going to other teams. We got players forcing trades. We got bringing Ben Simmons. He's back. Like, it was just so much
stuff going on
around us. I feel like we were locked in on the same page and understand, like, well, we're trying to do something special here. And I felt like your hands were tied a lot because you had to, as a coach, you got to deal with so much.
I didn't get to coach as much as I wanted to.
That's what it was. I didn't think we didn't get the full Steve Nash like I wanted, like you probably wanted. I just felt like it was just too much, too many distractions in a way. And you can't win that way. But I felt like we had great intentions, though. I felt like we cared enough. I felt like every day we were trying to push towards winning the champ. It was a great vibe in there. It's some of the best times. That first year, that's why I signed that deal. That first year, man, most fun ball I had. some of the most fun ball I had playing my whole life. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Brooklyn a lot. I love playing for Brooklyn, but it's just so much
stuff happened
around the guys that were committed to the situation. I felt like we were committed, but everybody else wasn't. It just was weird.
My favorite part in this whole thing is if you look at LeBron's face, it's just no reaction. It's like, oh, you couldn't win, can't relate. But look, he dives deeper. Kevin Durant dives deeper into his time in Brooklyn and says that it was viewed a failure really because of the NBA discourse. Now, most of us characterize Brooklyn's experiment of trying to develop a super team as a failure because they didn't win. But Kevin Durant really blames that on the discourse of the NBA and says, quote, even the ones that don't work out, you can still see some of the beauty in the Sacramento Kings that didn't win the chip or your Phoenix Suns that didn't win the championship. If you really love the game of basketball, you can pull great things from all of that stuff. And that's what I tend to do with the Brooklyn Nets situation. Now, guys, yes, let's be honest. Are there times that maybe NBA fans and NBA media put a little bit too much emphasis on winning championships? Sure. We've all had the conversation about ring culture and is it destroying the NBA? Is it destroying legacies of players and X, Y, and Z? But expecting anyone to look at the trio of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden with the Brooklyn Nets and say, yeah, they didn't win, but look at Nick Claxton and look at Cam Thomas and Bruce Brown and those guys. They really developed as great play. Like, you didn't win. Like, that matters, Brad.
It does matter. I, for one, am not one of these ring culture guys. I think I'm not here to deem 29 teams a failure. I think that's ridiculous. So to me, you know, he talks about those Kings teams, those Suns teams, Harden's Rockets teams. You can name a number of teams, Barkley with the Suns, whoever, who should be remembered as great teams, as fun teams, as successful teams. But if you sort of shut out all the noise and just close your brain off and think, what do I think of when I think of this team? Like if I think of those Kings teams with Vlade and Doug Christie and Mike Bibby, I don't think failure. When I think of the Nets, I think failure. And it's not because they didn't win the championship. It's because they were a disaster. Now, I wasn't inside of the locker room walls, but it was a total mess. You know, they try to form the big three when they bring in Harden, and that for a minute there, when all those guys were healthy and cooking, you saw a little bit of what they could be, but it was just these tiny little glimpses, and it was completely overshadowed by the drama. And I think Durant was a part of that. You know, sometimes as you get out of a situation, you develop some perspective. And now Steve Nash is sitting right in front of him and he's saying, oh, I didn't feel like you got to be the best coach. But I think at the time, there was some reporting that maybe Steve Nash wasn't doing the best coaching job, was maybe in a little bit over his head with his first coaching job, with those kinds of expectations, with those level of stars. And now Durant stepped away from it a little bit and he's saying the right things in front of Steve Nash. I don't think Durant was really ever the problem or has been the problem anywhere he's gone. The problem is Kyrie and the COVID shot, Harden, and he wasn't happy with Kyrie, Ben Simmons, as Durant alluded to. So I don't think of that team as a failure because they didn't win. I think of the team as a failure because they tried to put something together and it completely blew up.
Chris, I know you got something in the chamber. Let's go. Let's hear it.
Here's my thing. Hey, I love the way Brad elocuted that, but let me just say this. I grew up in the South, and my mom used to always say the same thing that makes you laugh is the same thing that'll make you cry. When they put this team together, right? Everybody in the world, I love to go back and get all of the discourse that said this is going to be one of the greatest teams. The way Kyrie recruited Kevin Durant not to go to the Knicks and to come there, and Harden. They always have that story. I remember the Lakers had Rondo, and they had Westbrook, and they had LeBron. They had all these guys. They're taking all these pictures. But when the season ended, what were they saying? Oh, this guy can't shoot. This guy's too old. They always print the retraction on page 25. And so my thing is to come on a podcast, and I like Kevin Durant, and listen, some of the things he says, there's some relevance to it. But as a former coach, I'm like, okay, but what if it did work out? What would you be saying? And so it did work out. So guess what we get to do? We have a job to be critical. It doesn't mean that, you know, that you're a failure as a player, or Steve Nash as a first-time head coach, coaching three divas, when you need a guy probably like a Popovich or a guy like a Phil Jackson to manage that situation with superstars, to put a first-year coach in there because he was a two-time MVP, thinking that he could do the same thing that Steve Kerr did when it was a much different situation. You wonder why it didn't work out. All the way up to the front office. Let's be real. Just because you throw guys together, look at the Yankees. They got the biggest purse strings every year. They don't win every year. So at the end of the day, again, when you're on LeBron, and you mentioned LeBron's face, I love, again, I didn't see that interview.
It was just a blank, it was a blank stare. He was like, sounds like excuses to me, bro.
Exactly. But again, because LeBron gets blamed for everything. And I'm like, Kev, this is part of it, man. This is part of being one of the best players, thought of that ever played a game. This is part of it.
I think it's also interesting because, yes, I agree with Brad, and we've had the conversation. I don't think rings and championships make or break a player, but let's be realistic about this situation. He left the Golden State Warriors, goes to Brooklyn to do what? To essentially prove that he can win on his own accord without Steph Curry, without that phenomenal Warriors team. So the entire reason that you left Golden State was to win in Brooklyn, and you didn't win. And granted, it's not like that is the end all be all, because there were moments where it looks like this Brooklyn Nets team could make something happen. There were a lot of other factors that went into ultimately them not winning. We all remember Kevin Durant's foot being a half an inch too big. And there's a lot of scenarios here that kind of go into the pot of why this Brooklyn Nets team didn't work. But to kind of expect people to look at this through rose-colored glasses and say guys like Nick Claxton got better and Bruce Brown got better and Cam Thomas got better, when you had a team of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden who were put together with the intention of super teaming their way to a championship, is just super disingenuous. Nobody's going to view the Brooklyn Nets like that. I'm sorry. They're just not.
Hold on. Okay. Here's my, and maybe it's because I'm getting a little older, but here's my thing on this. If you were the problem, then it's disingenuous. If Kyrie Irving came in here and said, oh man, Nick Claxton got better and we were trying to do all the right things, you weren't trying to do the right things. You were at the epicenter of that thing blowing up. So that's disingenuous. Kevin Durant did his part. You know how many things I've said out in my life? You know how many things I've said out in my life, all of us, I guarantee, where I intended to do something and fell a little bit short? That's not failing. That's life. Every time.
No,
I'm not looking at Kevin Durant. He's trying to win, so he didn't win, but he tried. He put his best foot, pun intended, forward. He's a toe on the line for maybe going to the
I
finals.
agree with you, Brad. I'm simply saying it's disingenuous for him. No. It's disingenuous for him to expect other people to look at the Brooklyn Nets tenure through rose-colored glasses. I'm not saying what he's saying is disingenuous. I'm saying nobody's going to look at that team and look at it as a half glass full situation when the team was put together with the intention of them winning a championship. No one's going to look at the positive of the situation.
No, you're right. It's true from the outside. It's true from the outside. But from the inside, I think we've all had situations where, man, it didn't go the way we wanted, but we try afterwards to pull the positives from it. We try to say, well, my ultimate goal wasn't achieved, but some good things came out of it. That's sort of like maturity and perspective in life. So I don't mind.
Of course. I agree with that.
Yeah. So that's my thing.
Listen, excuses are tools of the incompetent. What is Kevin Durant going to say with Steve Nash sitting there? Steve, you know what? This is your first year as a head coach. We probably should have had a more experienced coach. That probably would have been the best thing. And here's my thing. When you talk about the NBA and the discourse around it, we live in a fast food media, social media. That is the world right now. But that's also the world, guys, that they benefit from, that they make money from, that says they're the greatest players of all time. You can't have it both ways. And again, because they're not going to be genuine, because I have sources that talk about what happened on the inside of that situation. So if we're going to keep it 100, let's talk about everything that went down and not just talk about the surface stuff of why it didn't work. Because the shot and all that, but there are other reasons why it didn't work. You want to talk about those reasons? So again, if you're not going to be real about it, and you're just going to talk about stuff on the surface and then blame the NBA and the discourse, hey, man, four of the top five players in sports right now, four of the top five highest paid are NBA players. Like this is what it is. You can't have one without the other. You can't have the rose without the thorns. I'm sorry. This is what it is. This is the world we live in now. Kevin, it was not a success. If LeBron, now let me ask you this question. Let's juxtapose it. If LeBron had gone to Miami and they had Wade and Bosh, which I don't think is the same as having the guys they had in Brooklyn,
Right.
and they did the same thing in Brooklyn, what would we be saying about LeBron James right now?
We'd be saying the same thing, that he failed and that the Heat were a failure. Yeah,
Exactly.
but worse.
So
Right.
that's why that's why LeBron was sitting there going like, man, what? Hold on now. Hold on, bro. What are you up here saying on this show right now?
I'm sure this is not the last time we'll hear about Kevin Durant and his thoughts on his past teams. We have to hear about what happened in Phoenix one of these days. But when we come back, we are getting in a time machine and we're going to fast forward to the year 2027 because the free agent market is going to be a little interesting. We'll discuss after this. While there were some moves that shook the NBA more than others, this free agency was a lot quieter in some ways, and in some ways also underwhelming in comparisons to free agencies of the past. Here are some of the starting lineups, the new starting lineups via trades and free agency. And as we know, the new CBA and the second apron were the catalyst of a very underwhelming free agency this year. In fact, Brad Stevens actually spoke about this to the media in regards to the trades of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, saying directly the second apron is why those trades happened. So teams are obviously preserving future cap space, which means that we could be in store for a potentially very historic free agency in the year 2027. So here's a list of potential free agents, but here's the kicker. Every single one of them are over the age of 25. In fact, some are over the age of 30, but everybody is closer to 30 than they are to the age of 25, 21. So not only do we have a potentially historic free agent class, we also have a potentially historically, I should say, old free agency class. And old is quotations because 31 is not old, but in basketball years, it kind of is. Guys, looking at this list, I mean, this is insane. The youngest person on this list is Luka at 28 years old. The oldest person on this list is Steph Curry at 39. Now, it is expected that some of these guys will ultimately probably retire. Steph Curry probably is the most, I would say, realistic retiree or future retiree on this list. But looking at that, and kind of absorbing where all those big names will be in terms of basketball years. Chris, what goes through your mind of what we're in store for in 2027?
It certainly will be interesting. You make the point that, a lot of those guys possibly could be retired. And again, this is only the reason why we're talking about this. A, the money is historic, right? It's through the roof. So a lot of these guys will probably want to stay around. The question is, as you juxtapose that with OKC and what they've done with their youth, what will teams prioritize? Again, those names that you put up there, obviously Jokic will get extended, and and some of these other guys on there, like a Trae Young, they're young enough to get extended. But the question is, what will teams prioritize? And let's be honest, we're talking about this because of LeBron James playing at 40 at a historic level that we would even be thinking about giving a guy 39 another contract or 38 another contract, right? And how does that, lead to winning? So I agree with you. The second apron has done its job, but at the end of the day, with people preserving cap space. But the question is, what will teams prioritize? Because we saw in this year's draft, this is the most young players they've taken, 18, I want to say, that were freshmen or less, or freshmen and never playing a year in college that they've ever taken in NBA draft history. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, this is, to me, LeBron has driven his narrative that you can play beyond your years. I say that it's because the players are younger and these guys can still dominate playing against children. But at the end of the day, the question is, with the second apron, with preserving cap space, how much do you spend on some of these aging superstars? Because that's what they are, the majority of that list.
Yeah. I mean, Brad, I know you love this. You nerd out about this. And we can throw this graphic up one more time. There are names on this list that you have to believe are going to be paid, regardless of if it's with their current team or a future team, despite their age. Nikola Jokic being one. Yes, he'll be over the age of 30. It's realistic that he re-signs with Denver, and that's that situation. Obviously, Luka was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. He's the future of that organization. Giannis is a question mark if it will be with the Bucks, but even though he'll be 33 years old, he's going to get paid. So when you look at some of these names, despite their age, I think Trae Young is going to be an interesting conversation. You can expect that probably Steph Curry. I would probably be willing to bet James Harden, maybe Kawhi, depending on health. Those guys might be retired by the time 2027 comes around. But when you look at this list, despite the age, do you think that they will still be prioritized with these massive deals just because of who they are as players?
Okay, a couple things. Big difference between getting under the second apron and creating max cap space. Big difference. So the Celtics went out and got under the apron, or maybe even under the luxury tax, maybe even a few dollars underneath the salary cap. You want to sign one of these dudes, you got to have 50 million plus in actual cap space. Okay, so big difference. All these teams trimming to get under the apron, that does nothing. That just trims your tax bill. They don't give you money to sign Donovan Mitchell. Okay, so the way that it happened in the past is these guys kind of threw the breadcrumbs out of the 3 or 4 teams that they were going to think about when free agency came around. And then those teams planned accordingly. Now these guys don't do that. Everything is an extension with their current team. And then if they want to go somewhere else, they force a trade. So it becomes a very prohibitive thing for these teams to save cap space like teams did for years for Giannis. Oh, they saw the year. He's going to be a free agent this year. We better have our cap space available. The Knicks did it. Then you don't get any of these guys. Okay? So what's happening is these guys are going to probably extend with their team. Jokic is going to extend not this year, next year, because he can get a bunch more money by waiting a year. Doncic is going to extend with the Lakers. That can happen in August. It's probably going to happen. The other guys are old. Harden, Kawhi, Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, all those guys are old. So they're not going to be totally prioritized, to Chris's point.
In basketball years, by the way. Just want to make that clarification. They're old in basketball years.
The 2 names to watch on that list that you just put up are Donovan Mitchell and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, whether that means they are still with the Cavs and the Bucks respectively and they demand a trade, or they actually become free agents, I don't know. But those are the guys that are young enough and are in situations right now that feel like a 1 or 2 year thing. The Cavs window is right now. They blew past the second apron in this free agency period. They traded for Lonzo Ball. They cut no costs because they know the East is wide open. They're going for it right now. When these 2 years are up, Donovan Mitchell is going to be a guy where relocation we're going to have to really consider, and obviously Giannis. Now, whether that's via trade or free agency, I don't know. But on that list that I look at, look, Trae Young, they would have traded him last summer. There's really no market for him. We haven't even determined if he's an actual winning player. The other guys are old. Doncic is going back to the Lakers, and Jokic is going back to the Nuggets. The 2 guys to watch are Giannis, Mitchell, and probably Towns with New York, where we're going to see what happens this year and next year. And those 3 guys could very easily be on the move. By what mechanism, I don't know.
Chris, I want to ask you this because this CBA and this apron system has really just been criticized by not just, front offices, NBA media, but also the players. A lot of players have come out and spoken against this. And it's funny. It's an ongoing joke about CJ McCollum and how this is his fault and X, Y, Z. Shout out to my guy, CJ. Love him. Great wine, by the way, if you ever want to buy some wine. But obviously, this has changed the landscape of the NBA, and it's made it a lot difficult to keep teams together. We keep talking about that, to pay certain guys, prioritizing certain guys. Do you feel, obviously, there's nothing that can be done about it in the immediate future, but do you see a world where this CBA and this apron system is drastically redone because of just how difficult it has made to build a basketball team?
I mean, you can look at it two different ways. You can say it's difficult to build a basketball team. And to Brad's point about, this is about tax bills. This is not clearing cap space so you can sign a big time player. And, Boston's trying to get rid of some of the excess fat and saying, hey, man, we're just paying too much for this. Let's move some of these guys. That's all they're doing. Doesn't mean they're going to be able to sign anybody, have room to bring in more players. Again, you can talk about whether it's parity, whether it makes more teams competitive. Think about this. The OKC Thunder, you can talk about, for all intents and purposes, they signed a player they did not draft it. Lou Dort was undrafted. Caruso was a trade. Look at some of the guys. They just re-signed Jalen Williams. And obviously they have some guys they got in the lottery. And they just won the NBA championship without any of those players just put on that screen. Like, that is what this NBA and this apron system has done. And you need smart GMs that are taking great risk and smart risk, and owners that are really investing in the right players, and not just this big three system that doesn't work out. Then all of a sudden you end up in a tough situation with a tax bill and you can't win. So yeah, players are upset about it. But at the end of the day, as I said this last segment, 4 of the top 5 players in sports or in the NBA, it's working out great for them pay-wise. But at the end of the day, it may not be working great for some of the teams. Brad, you may disagree. It may not be working great for some of the teams as far as them making and driving revenue, but it's working great for the players. And there's more parity in the NBA.
Yeah, listen, I think Chris makes a great point. Look back at all of these superstar moves. You kind of have to go back to Kawhi Leonard. Durant to Golden State doesn't count because that was like cheating. But Kawhi to the Raptors is really the last one I can, really recall where you had this huge superstar move. That was your blueprint. Go out like that list we just put up. Go out and get one of the guys, and then you go win a championship. It doesn't really work like that anymore. The way that you win championships now is with depth, with quality depth, with functional depth. And that's where the guys that are getting hurt by the second apron, these guys that we're putting up on the graphic are still good. Whatever team they end up on, they're going to make their money. But where they're having to trim money to avoid these tax bills is, D'Angelo Russell used to get an $80 million contract. Now he's getting whatever he got from the Mavericks, $5 million, $6 million. These are the guys that are getting trimmed. Those are the guys that are being hurt by the tax bill. And that's how you build a team. That's how you build a championship now, is by working those margins to perfection. The biggest signings are Alex Caruso and Hartenstein in OKC. That puts you over the top. It's not somebody going out and making this big swing, which is why I think the Bucks moving for Miles Turner is ridiculous. You don't just bring in one player anymore and change your team. There's too much talent in the league for even the best players without the functional depth beneath them to make that big of a difference. And so teams don't see the advantage in hoarding all this cap space to make this big splash move when the depth of their roster hasn't been taken care of.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to continue to watch. It's definitely something that's going to be continued to be discussed in the world of the NBA, even throughout this offseason, I feel like. But we're going to stay in our time machine, because when we come back, it's the battle of the prime starting 5. You don't want to miss this. Welcome back, everybody, to Triple Threat. Ashley Nicole Moss, Brad Botkin, Chris Walker. And guys, one thing I love about NBA Twitter, besides all the ridiculous takes and all the people pretending to be insiders and in the know of who's going where, are the hypothetical scenarios that come from that timeline, that part of social media. And right now, we're going to play a little game based on one of those hypotheticals. So I'm going to show you this graphic here, and we are going to select which starting 5 you got. Now, granted, all of these guys are in their prime in this matchup. So at the top, we got a starting 5 in their prime. Some of these guys are still very much in their prime. Nikola Jokic, Giannis, Steph Curry, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard. Now, on the bottom, we got LeBron, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Joel Embiid. Now, notice the jerseys because that's the difference maker here. We got Paul George, Indiana Pacers Paul George. We have San Antonio Spurs Kawhi. Some may say it should be Raptors Kawhi, but we can have that argument. We have Houston James Harden, Miami LeBron, Cleveland Kyrie, Golden State Kevin Durant, obviously Joel Embiid. Jokic and Giannis and Steph are with the teams that they are currently still with. So, looking at this graphic, Chris, I'm going to start it off with you. Which starting five do you have all in their prime? Who are you going with?
Listen, you're making it really tough for me because because at the end of the day, you look at that top group with Steph, who I love, and you got Giannis, who's an MVP, and Jokic, who, last 3 years has dominated basketball.
Yeah.
But then you threw George in there. And that's
Whoa.
that's Kawhi as well. But you threw Paul George in there. And obviously,
Pacers Paul George, though.
It doesn't matter. He ran against Cavs, LeBron James, and that's where we end that conversation. And so there's no doubt the team at the bottom. Come on, the team at the bottom with Kyrie in his prime, with LeBron and what they did in Cleveland and KD. I mean, seriously. And James Harden was an MVP of the league. You got 3 MVPs up top. You got 3 MVPs at the bottom. Embiid is the question mark for me, just like Paul George up top. But LeBron makes up for a multitude of sins. And I just think that team at the bottom is a fantastic team to have. And it'd be tough, especially looking at the Olympics, as well, even though Harden was on this last team. I just think the LeBron teams just overshadows that completely. I know Brad, he's a LeBron hater, so he's probably not going to say that. So I don't know.
Brad, before you give your answer, I'm curious on your take about what Chris said about Paul George being the wild card because Pacers Paul George, we've had this argument before, OKC Paul George or Pacers Paul George, as an individual, he was an absolute hooper. The only thing I could say possibly, I don't know, I could make the argument that maybe Kawhi, Raptors Kawhi would have probably been better than Spurs Kawhi, but either way, both versions of Kawhi were his prime. But the Pacers slander for Paul George, I don't feel like that's fair, Brad.
No, it's not. Listen, and not only was he a stud in Indiana, but a perfect role player and support staff player. Paul George, for all his flaws, is actually not a guy that you want to be the best player on your team. So he slots in as an off-ball player on that team. If we're talking real basketball, he slots in as an off-ball player, doesn't need to dominate the ball, plays both ways. Indiana Paul George was a dog defender. That's going to be huge in this game. Okay, bottom team, Embiid is hurt, first of all, so they're playing with 4. And
I
the
know
other
we're talking
thing
injuries,
is,
Brad.
and the other thing is, James Harden is kind of neutralized on that team because he's not going to control the ball with Kyrie Irving and LeBron James. So James Harden as a floor spacer is diminishing returns. However, the top team, you give me Nikola Jokic's floor orchestration with Steph Curry's movement, and you could put 3 dudes from the YMCA with them, and it's over with. Jokic with the ball in his hands and Curry without the ball in his hands, it's over. Double-digit point spread to the top team.
I can't believe you with your infinite basketball wisdom. Paul George is hurt just as much as Embiid, number one.
Not when he was a Pacer.
I understand that, but Embiid is being hurt was still the MVP of the league, and Kawhi Leonard, who I love, right? He was an auxiliary player when he was with the Spurs. He wasn't one of the big 3. He's a good player.
Which is why it should technically be Raptors Kawhi, but even even Kawhi Spurs with this lineup, he doesn't have to be the number 1 guy.
But guys, here's the thing.
I didn't know we're talking lineup optimization here, Brad. Brad went basketball nerd on me for a second.
Yeah, it's even better because San Antonio Kawhi and Paul George, they know what they're doing. They're defending. San Antonio, Kawhi, and George defend. Our offense is Curry and Jokic. I don't need nothing. Curry moving with Jokic's passing, it's over. Over with.
Listen, you're going to have 3 of the top 10 scorers in NBA history on one team. Think about that. Who's stopping? Who is Jokic stopping? Who's Jokic guarding on ball screens? So you're going to have Paul George versus LeBron. We know how that worked out while he was in Indiana. Come on, you got to stop it. James Harden, you can say what you want. Who's stopping him? Steph? Who's Steph guarding? Kyrie?
Why?
We know how that worked
No
out.
problem.
I'm just saying, come on, Brad. You got to stop that. Stop it.
No, because
Brad,
all
your
those guys are
rebuttal?
going to have to go one-on-one. Durant, they're all going to go one-on-one. We're going to Jokic.
I forgot about him.
orchestrated. We're going to be a team. We're going to be a team. Yeah.
Well,
Top
okay.
team.
So let me get this, Brad.
Chris,
So let me
to
get
your-
this right.
to your
So let me get
point-
this right.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so let's talk matchups. Paul George is going to guard LeBron. Kawhi
Right.
is going to guard Durant, and Steph is going to
Right.
guard Kyrie. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a blowout, and you know who's going to win that one. You need
Hold
to
on, we'll
stop
flip
that.
it
Brad.
around. We'll
You know
flip it-
better.
flip
And
it
who's going to
around.
guard James Harden? Wow.
Well, we got
We do
George
have
Hill.
some mismatches, Brad. We do have some mismatches
No, we
because to Chris's point, you have in that scenario you have Jokic and Giannis remaining, and who are they gonna guard? You don't want Jokic or Giannis
Guys,
guarding James
I
Harden,
feel like you
especially
guys
not
are
Houston
forgetting-
James Harden.
Yeah, let's not forget this top team. If we put unless I'm mistaken, do we have Giannis? Are we just not talking about Giannis defending?
What zone on him?
He can't defend anyone. He's not going to get rebounds. He's not going to go to the hole.
No,
Like,
who is he gonna
everybody
defend though is the question.
Who can guard any one of these guys? Anyone
Oh,
Can't
listen,
guard Houston
nobody
James
on this-
Harden.
Hey,
Nobody on this graphic can be covered one-on-one. That's the truth. Nobody on this graphic can be defended. So it's going to be a 160 to 150 game. And in the end, we're going to score more because of the three ball, for one. Steph Curry moving is the total X factor. And we're going to slot better from a role player standpoint.
Brad,
Those other
you're
guys,
ignoring what an ISO demon James Harden was in Houston. Who's guarding him? You have
said
to give me an
Houston James
answer.
Harden. We're talking about in their prime now, Brad. In their prime. Think about it.
oh, I know.
In their prime. That's what we're saying. Like you're really going to say in their prime.
Who are you? You're coaching.
One-on-one.
You're coaching the top team. Who are you having guard Harden? Because you have to have somebody guard him. Otherwise, he's going to run amok
We're
out
gonna put
there.
Paul George on him probably.
If you think you're going to beat that top team by putting the ball in James Harden's hand and letting him go one-on-one,
That's not what I
you're
said.
sorely mistaken. Sorely. So if they want to play that way, the game's over. Game's over if they play that way.
But Brad, we're talking about in their prime. Houston James Harden was the MVP of the NBA. You know that, right? With D'Antoni,
No
he was
way.
the MVP of the NBA. That we're talking about in their prime.
I got you. Well, I could say the same thing. Steph Curry's the only unanimous MVP ever. I could say the
Steph.
same thing.
But
I'm with Steph,
at
but I'm
least
not-
at least with Steph, you have an even matchup between him and Kyrie guarding each other. You can't put
Listen.
Giannis or Jokic on
No, you
James
don't.
Harden,
One.
Houston Harden.
You don't have an even matchup. Don't even try to put Kyrie Irving in Steph Curry's
Who
category.
is Steph Curry?
Don't
Who
even
is Steph Curry
try.
guarding? Who's Steph Curry guarding?
Don't
by the
even
way?
try. Don't
Who
even
is
try.
Steph Curry
Now,
guarding?
secondly, if we're just going to go just straight up, who's the better player? We got two of the three best players and probably three of the best four. The three best players on that graphic are Curry, Jokic, and LeBron. We got two of them. After
What about
that,
KD?
you can start arguing. Who?
No, Kevin Durant.
KD.
Top 10
No,
scorer.
Jokic is a better player than Kevin Durant, and he connects the team more.
But this is
Yeah.
Golden State Warriors Kevin Durant, not KD now.
Jokic is a three-time MVP. He's a better player than Kevin Durant.
A better
Listen,
player. Wow.
this is
okay.
why I love
Better?
NBA Twitter, because it invokes conversations and
He
debates
plays on a
like
team
this
where everything.
off of something that will actually never happen. So mission accomplished. Look, when we come back,
Better
we have
player.
one
Wow,
more
KD's
debate.
coming at you, Brad.
We're digging into our bag about one more debate of what would you rather. Don't move. All right, we got one more debate to have. If you look at this graphic here, 30 years, 8 different champions. That's obviously under the late Commissioner David Stern. And below him is Adam Silver, our current commissioner of the NBA. 12 years, 9 different champions. So the question is, Dynasty versus Parity. Which is better? And that brings us back to the big three here. And I'm going to kick things off with Brad Botkin, who was oh so passionate about our last hypothetical. Brad, what are you taking, Dynasties or Parity?
I have fond nostalgia for, I grew up in the Jordan era. And I loved that. I did love Reggie Miller and the Knicks and all these guys sort of taking aim, and Karl Malone and Charles Barkley, and they're sort of being a designated monster at the end of the video game that everybody was aiming at. I did like that. But I really do like the way it is now, too, where I'm not going into a movie to which I already know the ending. And I know that strange twists can happen, and I'm more on the edge of my seat the way that it is now. I appreciate both ways, but I think for the common fan, I think that having a more wide open regular season, having the play-in matter, having matchups matter, and going into a postseason with 8 to 10 teams who can realistically win it, as opposed to 12 teams that are there just to be appetizers for the main dish. I think I do appreciate this the way it is now better. But I didn't hate the Dynasty.
I actually agree with you. I agree with you completely. Maybe it's because I'm a Knicks fan and I've never been a Dynasty. So like this makes it a lot more even for me. Be quiet, Chris. Okay. This makes it a lot more enjoyable for me as a fan because it makes it a little bit more realistic and a lot more possible for my team. And I'm sure a lot of other teams in the NBA and their fan bases feel the same way. Chris, I'm interested to see how you feel because just like Brad, you kind of grew up during the era, the prime of NBA dynasties. And the last dynasty we had was probably the Golden State Warriors. And that was even at this point, 10 years ago at this point?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was a big Laker fan back in the day, the Bulls, the Pistons for a minute. And, you're right. No one wants to know how the story's going to end all the time. But here's the deal. The players are better. They move around like they didn't move around back then. So that's why this is happening as well, because teams stay together. And I just think that at the end of the day, there is parity. There these younger players. Again, you look at the NBA Finals, and the two players that were the spotlight players were teams that weren't drafted through their teams. So I think that, the second apron, we can talk about how GMs are moving, how they're undervaluing talent, how guys are forcing trades. Kawhi leaves the Spurs and in 1 year wins a championship. I just think things are so different now. We can blame LeBron, or could we blame the Celtics big three?
That always really back to LeBron.
Well, I'm just saying, as far as the movement, Durant and those guys, the way they move around, it has changed the game where you can't have dynasties like you used to, even though Michael Jordan and Brad may disagree, used to rent players like the Rodmans and all those type of players to come in and help him get over the top as well. But at the end of the day, it's just a different world than it was back then. And I'll say this, if you talk to younger players, they're just used to it. Back then, you wanted to root for the one team. You wanted the Lakers and the Celtics at the end to be in the championship, or you wanted the Spurs and the Lakers to see or vie for who's going to go to the championship. It's just not like that anymore, and people are just accustomed to kids being here, teams being over there. The movement, I think, suits the times right now.
Yeah, I definitely think that this era of NBA fans have a drastically different experience than the both of you and even myself, because I can remember Golden State. I can remember the Miami Heat. I know I'm probably missing one. It'll come to me. The Lakers.
Spurs.
So even the Spurs as well. That's the other team I was thinking of. Yeah. So even in my youth experience as a basketball fan, I've seen dynasties. And I think this generation of basketball fans, which is why I don't think you see as much team loyalty as maybe the generations before. I think it's more player loyalty. And that's why you'll see kids rocking several different jerseys from several different teams because they go where their favorite player goes. Where back in our day, no, if you were a Knicks fan, a Lakers fan, a Spurs fan, a Sixers fan, it didn't matter who was on the roster. You maintained that jersey. Guys, this has been an incredible season. This was our season finale, unless anything monumental happens. But we want to thank you so much for joining us this entire season. If you missed the episode, scan this QR code. Have a very safe summer, and we'll see you in the fall.